Amazing turn of events. Her criticism revealed, transforming a millionaire CEO in unexpected ways. The quarterly team meeting was about to begin, and Jake Harper couldn't shake the jitters that gripped him as he adjusted his tie in the mirror. He was the CEO of a booming tech startup, a title that came with its share of expectations. But today felt different. There was a tension in the air, an unidentifiable weight that settled on his shoulders. When he walked into the conference room, the silence was deafening, the anticipation palpable. Jake stood at the head of the long table, surrounded by a sea of eager faces. His carefully crafted opening statements aimed to impress the board, yet as he spoke, he felt an unsettling sensation. His heart raced under the scrutiny of their gazes. It was as if they were all waiting for him to slip, a crack in the facade of his carefully curated image. Then came Sarah, the intern with bright eyes and a voice that cut through the chatter. "Jake, can I say something?" Her hand shot up boldly. Shock rippled through the room. A hush fell as she expressed her concerns over his leadership style, calling out his tendency to prioritize profit over the workforce's well-being. The words reverberated in his mind. He dismissed her with a wave, but self-doubt gnawed at him like an uninvited guest. After the meeting, Jake retired to his office, fortified with tech gadgets, sleek furniture, and luxurious decor that screamed accomplishment. But layered beneath the glow of his success was a gnawing ache for something more, something authentic. The pressure from investors was mounting, and with quarterly revenues dipping below expectations, the air in the office felt thick with discontent. Employees who once buzzed with creativity now drifted through the halls like shadows of their former selves. Late that night, amidst rain tapping against the glass, a thought flickered in his mind. Could Sarah's boldness hold the key to savaging the company he built? His mother's voice resonated softly, reminding him of the importance of humility and community. What had he sacrificed for success? He hesitated, the weight of lost family relationships pressing down on him. Just then, he tapped out a message to Sarah, proposing a mentorship arrangement. To his surprise, she accepted. They met at a quaint cafe where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee enveloped them. Their discussion spiraled beyond mere corporate strategies. They explored deeper connections, ambitions, and visions. There was an exhilarating energy in their conversations that sparked something he hadn't felt in years. But with that came unease. Whispers began circulating in the office. Jake, relying on a much younger intern, was viewed as unorthodox, even foolish. Colleagues he once trusted questioned his judgment, drawing lines of division where he hoped for collaboration. And then came the investor presentation. The moment of truth loomed. Jake felt a knot in his stomach when he stood before the crowd, meant to unveil the future of his company, one that was significantly influenced by Sarah's input. Uncertainty clutched at him. Would they accept the bold shift he was proposing, led by someone deemed inexperienced? He could sense the scrutinizing stares of investors, the weight of societal expectations pressing down on him. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he prepared to address a pivotal question from a key investor about involving Sarah, he sensed his heartbeat quicken. Would he defend what felt right or crumble under the pressure of judgment? His mind raced, recalling the warmth of family gatherings, laughter shared over dinners, laughter he'd allowed to fade. The silence clung to the room as he opened his mouth, poised to respond. Would he take the leap? In that moment of truth, every breath felt weighted. Anticipation coiled tight in the air, leaving everyone, including Jake, on the edge of anticipation. Jake inhaled deeply, the weight of investors' expectations pressing on him like a vice. This was no longer just a corporate presentation, it was a reflection of his evolving identity. For months, he had buried himself in numbers and strategies, sidelining his integrity in pursuit of profit margins. Sarah's relevant insights had opened his eyes to a new perspective, one encompassing a compassionate approach to leadership. "Thank you for the question," he began, his voice trembling slightly. Flashes of failure flickered through his mind, alongside the face of a young intern who possessed the courage to challenge him. "Involving Sarah in our strategy is integral to our future, not just as a company but as a community." A subtle shift in the investor's demeanor gave Jake a glimmer of hope. Perhaps this was the turning point he desperately needed, to demonstrate that vulnerability didn't equate to weakness. He went on to delineate Sarah's innovative approaches, emphasizing how they would not only benefit their bottom line, but also uplift their team spirit. This was about reversing his previous neglect of employee welfare, reminding himself that a thriving workplace indeed fostered creativity. However, the room remained oddly quiet, and Jake sensed the tension from board members. They were divided, and he could see doubt reflected in their narrowed eyes. The bravado he initially felt was fading. What if they wouldn't accept the shift he was trying to implement? The fear of rejection loomed over him like a storm cloud. When the meeting adjourned, Jake stepped into his office, anxiety swirling with renewed determination. He sank into his chair, replaying his words. Had he done enough to shift their perceptions? His phone chimed, breaking through the fray of his thoughts. It was Sarah. "Jake, I think we need to discuss this further. I appreciate your trust. It could be vital for both of us moving forward," she typed. Her straightforwardness was infectious, igniting something within him. It was a reminder that sometimes the strongest partnerships came from those who were less seasoned, as they brought fresh perspectives unquenched by cynicism. With palpable urgency, he arranged to meet her that evening. Across the cafe table, the steam from their cups blurred the edges of their surroundings. "I think this is more than just a professional mentorship for me," Jake confessed. "You have opened my eyes to a model of leadership that values people over profits." "That's the only way to sustain success," Sarah replied, her bright eyes ever encouraging. "When employees feel valued, they give their best, and that's how innovation happens." Her enthusiasm was contagious, yet Jake grappled with an underlying fear. Was he merely seeking validation? Could he craft a new identity as a leader who prioritized empathy without sacrificing excellence? As they conversed, ideas flowed, new strategies, visions of company culture, and how to shape an organization that thrived on trust rather than fear. Each word sparked excitement, but lurking in the background was his growing anxiety about potential backlash. How would they convince the board to embrace a shift that felt so drastic? After their meeting, Jake returned home. The weight of his responsibilities intensified. At that moment, he realized he stood at a crossroads. This journey hinged on courageous decisions, not just for the company, but for his own personal redemption. The ensuing days saw him readjusting his leadership style, focusing on inclusive communication. But as he prepared to face the board once again, a moment loomed that would test his resolve. An imminent confrontation with an increasingly hostile faction of investors who didn't see Sarah's value, and a refusal to accept change. As Jake prepared mentally, he couldn't shake the anxiety reminding him of how much was on the line. The time had come to face his greatest challenge yet, the pushback that could either break him or set him free. Would he be strong enough to stand by what he believed? Jake stood outside the boardroom, rehearsing his opening lines while glancing at his watch. The minutes seemed to stretch like elastic, each one pulling his anxiety tighter. Today would not merely be another meeting. It was an opportunity to institutionalize the values he had recently embraced. He felt that unmistakable pulse of fear. What if they rejected this new vision? Once inside, the room felt oppressive. Jake's heart thumped loudly as he surveyed his audience. The directors were seated in a semicircle, skepticism coldly reflecting off their faces. He took a deep breath and launched into his presentation, recalling the sincerity Sarah had inspired in him. "Today, I want to share a vision that extends beyond profits and charts," he began. He outlined the strategies Sarah and he had brainstormed: enhanced employee engagement initiatives, community outreach programs, and an innovative feedback system to empower everyone in the organization. Yet with each new point, he sensed mounting resistance. The initial murmur of dissent hovered in the air like an electric current. At one moment, one of the board members, a longtime ally, raised an eyebrow. "Jake, are you suggesting we shift our core values? What about profitability?" He articulated each word with calculated precision, a typical upper management ruse to sow doubt and distraction. This was the moment Jake had anticipated, the very confrontation that could make or break his resolve. He swallowed hard but stood firm. "Profitability is essential," he replied. "But if we prioritize our people, profits will follow. Look at companies like PayPal and Google. They thrive precisely because they empower their teams." A silence fell. Jake felt the heat of their scrutiny and squared his shoulders. If he faltered now, he would demonstrate the same weakness he had been desperate to escape. This wasn't merely about numbers, it was about belief. But as the discussion unfolded, The initial pushback gave way to nuanced challenges. Another board member, an esteemed older gentleman with decades of experience, interjected, "You're asking us to take a leap without clear metrics. What if this approach fails?" Jake recognized that fear. He had lived it, clinging to metrics like a lifeline. "What if we never try?" he countered, surprising himself with the passion in his voice. "What if we choose to remain stagnant, clutching at what's comfortable while the world around us changes? I'm not asking for blind faith. Let's pilfer the conventional and draft new metrics to quantify our cultural impact." An exchange of glances passed among the board members, a silent struggle between tradition and innovation. As Jake continued, he drew courage from Sarah's belief in him. He shared anecdotes from smaller businesses that had flourished by fostering an inclusive environment, weaving a narrative of compassion into his arguments. With each example, he felt a weight lift. He was not just advocating for Sarah, but for a more authentic self. Toward the end of the meeting, several board members expressed cautious interest. The faintest smile broke on the face of one of them, a sign of potential acceptance. Yet Jake noticed that the resistance remained lurking. One particular board member still had his arms crossed defiantly. After the meeting, a wave of adrenaline washed over Jake. Had he turned the tide, or were they merely appeased by a fleeting moment? Sarah met him outside, her eyes reflecting a mix of pride and concern. "You held your ground," she said, her voice steady, but he could sense the underlying current of apprehension. "Still, there's one member I can't read," he replied. "There's a fierce loyalty to the old ways. If he doesn't come around, well, it might all fall apart." As they walked toward the exit, Jake concluded that his journey was far from over. He didn't just need the board's approval, he needed to solidify his own commitment to transformation. Tomorrow would bring another meeting with an even tougher agenda, one that would see him confronting more than just opposing opinions. He would have to confront the very essence of his leadership identity. Could he persuade the final stronghold to embrace a culture of empathy? Or was he destined to be the last of a dying breed? Jake awoke to the harsh light of dawn slicing through his windows, remnants of yesterday's meeting still gnawing at him. He turned over, the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily on his chest. The brick wall of resistance posed by that one board member haunted him. What had he missed? What arguments left unspoken could sway the undecided? With coffee brewing in the kitchen, Jake wandered through his mental landscape, traversing each strategy, his mind racing. This was more than just a board meeting. It was a test of conviction that he could not afford to fail. Could he summarize his vision succinctly? Could he paint the potential future clearly enough to motivate change? As the coffee gurgled, he jotted down key points, trying to clarify his thoughts. He sought clarity over fog. He needed that moment of connection, the bridge that linked his quantifiable vision to the abstract values of the reluctant board member. His phone buzzed with a message from Sarah. "Ready for round 2? It was a simple text, but it stirred a sense of urgency within him. He wasn't merely ready, he was compelled. Her unwavering support had ignited a sense of responsibility within him, to not just champion change, but to live it. Revisiting the office, Jake passed his colleagues, who were lost in their own worlds. For the first time, he felt an overwhelming sense of duty to ignite a fire within them too. The culture he envisioned needed to extend beyond the boardroom. It had to permeate every corner of the organization. Settling into his desk, he drafted an email invite for an all-hands meeting. He needed to rally the entire team, share the vision, and invite them into the dialogue. It was time to forge alliances down in the trenches where ideas took root and flourished. After sending the email, Jake returned to his notes. He mapped out his agenda for the meeting, balancing brevity with substance, laying out tangible ways for team members to contribute toward building a better culture. Each line felt like a lifeline back to his purpose. At the board meeting later that morning, the air buzzed with anticipation. This time, as he took his place at the head of the table, Jake felt a shift within himself. He was not just a participant in this corporate game. He was a catalyst for systemic change. When the contentious board member shifted his weight with an air of skepticism, Jake saw not an opponent, but an opportunity. "I welcome your concerns," he began, locking eyes with the elder man. "But imagine this. If we align our values with our mission, what might happen? What metrics would we create together to report on this success?" The old-timer's arms uncrossed slightly, the slightest sign of receding resistance. Jake pressed on, presenting the findings from his rallying email, integrating feedback he'd gathered. "If our employees thrive on the ground level, their engagement transforms our bottom line. Are we willing to take that risk?" As discussion erupted around the table, He could feel the initial barriers crumbling. The old ways still cast shadows, but the light of new possibilities flickered forward, igniting deeper conversations about transforming culture. Yet even amid victories, Jake sensed doubt, a looming realization that each nudge toward progress might awaken more profound challenges. If he succeeded in fraying existing loyalties, who might retaliate? How many would resist before finally unearthing a substantial change? Jake's pulse quickened as he sensed the conversation reaching a critical mass. He was on the brink of something enormous, but it came with an awareness of impending backlash. The final frontier lay in navigating each pushback as constructive feedback rather than obstacles, an exercise in leadership he had both craved for and dreaded. He felt the board's collective gaze, their reactions pulsing through the air like vibrations off a tuning fork. Would his vision unravel him, or serve as the keystone for a new narrative? The room held its breath, and in that suspended moment, Jake faced the ultimate question. What price would he pay to make this vision a reality? With the moment hanging like ripe fruit, he prepared to transition into a new phase, one that would redefine leadership not just for him, but for the entire organization. Jake left the boardroom with an unsettling mix of exhilaration and trepidation swirling within him. Despite the promising discussion, he knew deep down that landing the support of the board was just the beginning. The real challenge lay in transforming the energy and ideas shared today into a committed culture shift throughout the organization. As he stepped back into the bustling office, he felt invisible eyes following him. His colleagues were curious, whispering and wondering about the meeting's outcome. The notion that he could lead them toward a united vision was intoxicating, yet the fear of failure loomed large. What if the board's tentative acceptance gave way to silent opposition from within the team he aimed to inspire? He wasted no time. Jake quickly gathered his thoughts for the all-hands meeting. He envisioned a large room filled with attentive faces, eager to hear his words, but also skeptical of rapid change. The image rattled him. Would they even see the benefit of aligning their values with broader company goals? Moments before the meeting began, he revisited the notes he'd prepared, his hands shaking slightly as he glanced down. This agenda wasn't just a plan, it was his chance to ignite passion across the organization. He took a deep breath and stepped up to the front, feeling the cool air of the room against his skin, amplifying his clarity. "Thank you all for coming today," he started, his voice steady against the backdrop of murmurs. "I wanted to share what was discussed at the board meeting. We are on the brink of something transformative, and each one of you plays a vital role in that." Jake saw a few nods as he elaborated on the principal concepts emerging from their boardroom discussions, the importance of embedding cultural values into their workflow. He encouraged feedback along each step of the journey, framing it as a collective endeavor rather than a dictate from above. But as he spoke, the familiar face of Marcus, a long-tenured team member, shifted from passive interest to fierce skepticism. During the Q&A, Marcus interrupted. "Jake, while I appreciate the ambition, do you genuinely think we can shift the culture that easily? I don't see how a pamphlet of values can change our daily grind. You'll need to show us proof of concept, not just words." His heart dropped. This was the confrontation he feared, the voice of dissent that could echo through the halls if not handled carefully. Jake recognized the challenge tucked in Marcus's words. It wasn't just a question, it was a demand for tangible change to back his vision. "Absolutely, Marcus, your point is valid," Jake replied, feeling the weight of authority press against him. "I'm not here to sell ideas. I want to collaborate on implementing them. What if we can pilot a small initiative that reflects our values, a project to demonstrate our potential impact?" The room buzzed with intrigue at this proposition. Internal animosities began to shift as others chimed in, offering suggestions on how they might create a meaningful test case. The initial negativity was becoming nourishment for collaboration, catalyzing conversation that Jake hadn't anticipated. He felt a flicker of hope igniting in the discussions. But doubt still clawed at him. What if Marcus was only the beginning? What if more team members harbored the same hidden resentment, fearing that any change threatened their comfortable status quo? He needed to preempt this wave of resistance, to transform it into constructive energy. As he navigated through the momentum of the meeting, questions loomed large in his mind. Could he truly convert skepticism into engagement? He glanced at his watch, realizing they had surpassed the scheduled time, but rather than feeling anxious, he relished the dialogue unfolding. Yet as the session concluded, Jake's inspiration wrestled against the reality that change seldom came without casualties. Non-conforming thoughts crept in. Would he be forced to make hard decisions about colleagues who were resistant? Could their dissent carve out divisions that would ultimately undermine his vision altogether? With each passing minute, Jake felt the pressure mounting. The weight of his responsibility bore down on him as the meeting ended. He had made progress, but was it enough to secure belief in his leadership? He left the room with his mind racing, noting how Marcus's challenge had planted seeds of doubt mixed beautifully with opportunity. Clarity was blurring, but he sensed growth, a newly forged commitment to tackle the challenges ahead. Deep within, a voice urged him to strategize the next steps, the ultimate inquiry dancing tantalizingly at the forefront of his mind. What sacrifices would he be willing to make to bring about this change? That unsettling thought lingered like a whisper as he prepared to take the next leap. Could he summon the courage to confront the rising tides of discontent? As he approached his office, a new sense of urgency coursed through him, setting the stage for what was to come. Jake sat at his desk, the buzz of conversation outside his office a mere hum beneath the weight of his thoughts. The meeting had been a landmark moment, but as the excitement faded, reality crept in. Marcus's challenge reverberated through his mind like a haunting echo. Was he prepared to lead when so many were hesitant to follow? He needed a plan, a structure to pilot the initiative he had proposed. But where to begin? The pressure of leading his team into a cultural transformation was dizzying, and every moment spent in indecision felt like an eternity. The stakes were rising, and the potential for failure loomed like a dark cloud over him. As he stared blankly at his computer screen, a flicker of inspiration sparked. What if he created a task force, a small, focused team that could channel the dissent into actionable ideas? They could explore ways to test the new values without overwhelming everyone. This would not only provide Marcus and his allies with the proof of concept they were craving, but also engage them in the process of change. Jake picked up his notebook, the pages filled with ideas from his previous brainstorming sessions. He began jotting down names, people who had shown passion, creativity, and, most importantly, a willingness to engage. Each name represented a unique perspective that could help bridge the gap between the board's vision and the team's reality. However, another thought nagged at the back of his mind. Would this task force simply serve as a precursor to more significant changes, or would it become a breeding ground for dissent? Marcus had voiced concerns that would not simply vanish with a new committee. He recognized that real passion came from genuine investment in what they were trying to achieve. Jake leaned back in his chair, the rhythm of his tapping fingers slowly turning into a beat of determination. He was not merely drafting a group of employees to represent change, he was mapping out a movement. This realization ignited a fire within him. Yes, there would be resistance. Yes, the fear of failure was paralyzing. But he could harness that fear, channel it into productive dialogue. He stood up and paced the room, envisioning how the new team would operate. They would need to meet frequently, share their insights, and construct a real framework to track their progress, a tangible goal. Rather than presenting a polished plan to the wider group, they'd highlight the evolution in real time, fostering quick adjustments and learning along the way. Before he knew it, an hour had passed. The cacophony outside had died down, and his colleagues were heading home for the day. Yet Jake felt more energized than ever. He pulled out his phone, ready to reach out to potential collaborators. It was time to sow the seeds of excitement they needed, the idea of being a part of something impactful, something that could truly change their work environment. But as he began drafting an email to the selected individuals, he paused. Doubts lingered. Would this task force genuinely cultivate a culture of collaboration, or would it foster an even deeper divide? Would his actions alienate others who felt bypassed in the decision-making process? Returning to his chair, he wrestled with the implications. He couldn't just rely on his instincts. He needed to weave inclusivity into this initiative, ensuring the voices of dissent weren't just heard but felt valued. But what would that look like in practice? As he put the phone down, the nagging thought resurfaced. How could he create a culture that invited skepticism rather than shutting it down? The challenges ahead were daunting, but Jake couldn't shake a growing sense of resolve. He had one chance to set the stage for true evolution, and he was determined not to squander it. Then, he remembered Marcus, the critical voice that had unsettled him. What if, instead of bypassing the opposition, he reached out directly? Could he transform Marcus from a critic into an ally? Jake took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling over him. This would not be just an invitation to meet. It would be a challenge to engage, to create a unified vision from the ground up. The time had come to face Marcus. Could he convert this skepticism into partnership? As he reached for his phone again, the pulse of the future quickened in his chest. Would he dare to confront the anxiety that brewed each time he thought of Marcus? The outcome of his initiative hinged on this moment, and his willingness to embrace the discomfort of direct confrontation. The phone felt heavier than ever in Jake's hand as he stared at the screen displaying Marcus's number. This was a pivotal moment. He could either continue to siphon confidence from his internal dialogue or succumb to the familiar grip of doubt. What if he miscalculated? What if the conversation turned hostile, all his plans unraveling in real time? The weight of potential failure met with the spark of ambition. He lowered the phone, wrestling with the juxtaposition of his growing resolve and paralyzing fear. A surge of adrenaline coursed through him as he envisioned alternate outcomes. What if, instead of encountering hostility, he struck a chord with Marcus? What if their meeting turned into a brainstorming session that unlocked innovative ideas? Shifting in his chair, Jake closed his eyes momentarily, imagining the dialogue. It played out like a balancing act, one where he had to confront, persuade, and perhaps even win Marcus over to his side. He envisioned presenting his thoughts clearly, inviting Marcus to offer his input, rather than simply countering every argument. The thought was exhilarating and terrifying, intertwined with a visceral sense of vulnerability. Opening his eyes, Jake grabbed a piece of paper and began outlining key points he wanted to address. He recognized the importance of not only discussing the task force, but also validating Marcus's fears and concerns about the cultural shift he was trying to implement. This would require a delicate blend of assertiveness and empathy, a tightrope walk that could either solidify his leadership or identify him as amateurish and ill-suited for the challenge at hand. Drawing in a deep breath, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him, nudging him to act. The time for hesitation had passed. The prospect of turning Marcus's skepticism into collaboration was not just an ideal, it was a necessity for success. He typed a quick message, requesting a meeting under the guise of wanting to gain insights on how best to approach the task force initiative. A simple adjustment in language would shift the narrative from confrontation to collaboration, a partnership built on mutual respect. His finger hovered over the send button, the weight of his decision potent, marking the shift from passive leader to proactive developer. After hitting send, a knot of anxiety remained twisted in his gut. Despite the outward calm, internally he was a storm of anticipation and regret. He still had much to reflect on, how to manage the inevitable pushback not just from Marcus, but from others who would feel their voices and roles were being marginalized. Retreating into his mind, he began mapping out strategies beyond the direct confrontation. How could he cultivate an inviting atmosphere where thoughts could flow without fear of backlash? He envisioned hosting small forums where employees could voice their concerns before the task force became a visible entity. By presenting this initiative as organic rather than imposed, he could mitigate the very dissent he feared. Meanwhile, the clock ticked away, urgency creeping through the room as he thought about time wasted. He stood, feeling a new resolve building within him. The looming confrontation with Marcus was merely one facet of the challenge ahead. He would need to orchestrate a tapestry of voices, no easy feat when each strand ran the risk of generated tension. The potential for transformation existed, but only if he could become the leader who bridged the disparate influences within his team. Just then, Jake's phone buzzed on his desk, a reply from Marcus requesting to meet the very next day. The mix of excitement and dread surged again. Tomorrow's meeting could either be his moment of truth or a slip into chaos. Jake realized that this was not just about leading a team, it was a transformative moment for himself, a chance to test his leadership mettle and reshape his vision of collaboration. As he stood there, heart racing, the reality clicked into focus. He wasn't just shaping a group, but growing into a leader shaped by challenges and connections. The fear of the unknown loomed larger than ever, but his resolve had become unshakable. Now the question remained, would Marcus meet him with open ears or a closed mind? The stakes had been raised, and Jake knew he had to bring his best self to that meeting, not merely as a facilitator of change, but as an architect of a new culture. Was he truly ready to lead? Tomorrow would be the first test of his evolving leadership. With that thought, he turned back to his computer, ready to draft the outlines for the forums he had envisioned, preparing to nurture the roots of inclusive growth he so desperately needed. Jake awoke the next morning with a mix of eagerness and trepidation knotting his stomach. The sun streamed through the window, an external reminder of the new day and the opportunities it held. He glanced at the clock, counting down the minutes until his pivotal meeting with Marcus. This wasn't just a matter of professional development. It felt deeply personal. Each tick reverberated in his chest like a countdown to a revelation, amplifying the tension building inside him. After a hasty shower, he stood before the mirror, the fog contrasting with the sharpness of his own gaze. Who was he becoming? The question lingered unsettlingly in his mind. He felt the weight of expectation, not just from Marcus, but from himself. He envisioned not just a conversation, but a crucible that could forge the leader he aspired to be, complete with both flaws and strengths. In the office, the air hummed with an undercurrent of nervous energy. Colleagues passed silently, each lost in their thoughts as he navigated the floor. Jake understood this atmosphere. It mirrored his own uncertainty. Would they embrace this shift toward a collaborative culture, or would it be met with opposition? With each step, he rehearsed his points, grounding his thoughts in credible arguments, yet there was something nagging at him, a lingering uncertainty about how to approach Marcus's skepticism without provoking defensiveness. As he entered the conference room, he found it empty, allowing himself a brief moment to collect his thoughts. The walls bore testimonies of past victories, framed acknowledgments of successful projects that had once seemed insurmountable. He took a deep breath, visualizing how he'd handle the conversation with Marcus. This required courage and finesse, a masterful dance around potential landmines of resistance. When the door finally swung open, Marcus walked in, wearing his usual expression, a mask of professional indifference. Jake's heart raced. He hadn't expected anything less, but it made his anxiety palpable. Marcus settled into the chair opposite him without a word, crossing his arms defensively. The silence loomed thick, nearly crushing. Jake cleared his throat, a signal he hoped would bridge the gap. "Thanks for meeting with me, Marcus. I wanted to discuss the upcoming task force initiative. I believe we can make it an organic part of our culture rather than an imposition." Marcus narrowed his eyes, skepticism clear on his face. "How can we be sure it won't just become another corporate mandate? You know the morale is already low." In that moment, Jake felt the familiar pang of doubt, yet in its wake surged a wave of determination. "It can't be a mandate, it has to be a conversation," he replied, leaning slightly forward, hoping to create an air of cooperation. "I want to hear your thoughts on how we can involve everyone ahead of time." The shift in dialogue had begun. He noted Marcus's posture relax slightly, the tension in his shoulders easing. They exchanged ideas. Some took on shape, while others fell flat. But collectively, they began to weave a narrative of inclusion. Jake could see cracks forming in Marcus's skepticism as discussions around creating forums to capture the team's sentiments emerging. But as they delved deeper, shadows of Marcus's history began to creep back in. The fear of change tugged at him. Jake realized that what he hadn't anticipated was also the challenge of confronting Marcus's own past failures, his defensive walls erected from years of navigating corporate politics. "Jake, change can be dangerous," Marcus finally said, his voice low. "How do we ensure that this isn't just another failed attempt at shifting the culture?" The question resonated, echoing through Jake's mind like a challenge he had to confront, not only to reassure Marcus, but to embody leadership. "We can't control every outcome," Jake admitted, "but I believe that by including everyone in the conversation, we build a foundation of trust." Marcus's brow furrowed, indicating Jake had reached a critical inflection point. What was more at stake? The initiative, their partnership, or Jake's evolution as a leader? In that moment, Jake felt a powerful realization wash over him. This was not simply a meeting, it was a chance to unlock something within himself. A leader wasn't defined by comfort or consensus, but by the courage to embrace vulnerability. Would Marcus be swayed by this newfound vision Jake articulated? Or would he continue to resist, forcing Jake to reconsider whether he could navigate the tumultuous waters of leadership? Jake took a deep breath, prepared for the next wave of dialogue as he pondered the turning point ahead, an uncertain trajectory fraught with opportunity and risk. Which direction would they go from here? The meeting had only just begun, and the stakes couldn't be higher. The first few moments hung in the air, thick with unspoken tensions. Marcus's eyes bore into Jake, measuring every word, every hesitation. Jake felt the pressure of his boss's scrutiny. It wasn't merely a question of professional respect. It felt as if Marcus were dissecting his very essence. "Trust is built on transparency, Jake. It's not enough to preach inclusion without demonstrating it." Marcus's voice broke the silence, steady, almost too calm. Jake sensed the core of the challenge. More than Marcus's doubts about the initiative, it was about securing his own credibility in a workplace notorious for half-hearted transformations. "Agreed. This isn't just chatter for the sake of it. We need actionable steps." Jake considered his next move carefully. He envisioned the team dynamic they had discussed: formal feedback sessions, informal coffee catch-ups, inclusive brainstorming. They were skills he had observed from great leaders, not just from books, but from real interactions that resonated, heart to heart. Imagine the team sharing their ideas openly, bringing a sense of collective ownership, Jake continued, infusing his tone with conviction, not solely top-down dictates. He watched Marcus's reaction, looking for any signs of agreement. There, a slight nod, barely perceptible, but it ignited a flicker of hope within Jake. But the flicker was extinguished just as quickly. Marcus leaned back, steepling his fingers, his expression unreadable. Nice vision, but how do you plan to address the pushback from people who see this as more work on their already full plates? Jake's mind raced. This wasn't idle skepticism, it was rooted in experience, in the painful resistance he knew too well. He hesitated briefly, but he could not afford to waver now. By involving them early, if they understand the why, they may feel less burdened and more motivated to contribute. Marcus's brow furrowed, and Jake braced himself for a counterattack. And what if they don't buy into that? Say they'd rather keep to their silos? Jake swallowed hard, grappling with the harsh reality that many would resist. Rising to the occasion, he took a deep breath, channeling the energy he had felt since waking. I'll have to listen and adapt. It's not about imposing. It's about inviting dialogue. Listening doesn't solve the problem, Jake. You need actionable results, not just discussions. What happens when it fails? The challenge was met with a commanding tone, but Jake noticed something. Marcus's posture shifted, signaling a hint of interest at least. Inwardly, Jake knew he had more work to do. He recalled the countless hours spent at leadership workshops, dissecting case studies, yearning to understand how to turn theory into practice. Taking a gamble, he asked, "What led you to build walls around leadership? What did you learn from those missteps?" The question hung palpably. Marcus's hold on the conversation shifted as he appeared to grapple with both surprise and introspection. Resistance flickered in his eyes, replaced by vulnerability, as he recounted a past failure that had cost him dearly. "This isn't easy for me, Jake," Marcus muttered, each word carefully chosen, revealing a layer of self-awareness Jake hadn't anticipated. Trust, once broken, can be hard to rebuild. "Therein lies our opportunity," Jake replied, feeling the emotional charge in the room. "If we can be transparent about our past, the team will respect our journey. They'll see that we're in this together." As the conversation pressed on, something within Jake shifted. Each exchange stoked the flames of his leadership potential. They weren't just discussing an initiative anymore. They were intricately weaving together personal narratives, a collaboration of experiences anchored by their different approaches to vulnerability. What had started as apprehension morphed into a profound determination. "Let's create a framework where everyone feels not just safe, but accountable. We can hold feedback sessions, check-ins, even anonymous surveys," he suggested, noting Marcus's faltering resistance, now worn down by sincerity. "Your enthusiasm is commendable." Marcus finally relented, gratitude tinging his voice. "But we need a clear plan moving forward." "Of course," Jake responded, his pulse quickening as the expectation shifted. "I'll draft something concrete and share it with the team before the week's end." As they wrapped up, Jake felt a sense of empowerment. The room no longer felt daunting. Instead, it buzzed with possibilities. Yet as he turned to leave, Marcus's voice stopped him. "But remember, the real challenge lies ahead. Can you sustain this energy when that initial approval fades, when the criticisms arise? That's when true leadership is tested." The weight of those words echoed in Jake's mind, a duality of expectation and challenge coiling tightly. He sensed that their journey was only beginning, shadowed by doubt but illuminated by newfound resolve. As he stepped out of the conference room, Jake realized he was on the verge of uncharted territory. His thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind of plans and adaptations. Would he rise to meet the storm of adversity and criticism? He took a deep breath, fueled by resolve, as possibilities spiraled before him. What awaited him on this journey? An evolution, a triumphant breakthrough, or a daunting failure? The next steps loomed inevitable and uncertain. In that moment, he understood. This venture would redefine not just the team's culture, but perhaps his own identity as a leader. Jake stood in front of his office's expansive windows, gazing out at the cityscape below. The weight of the past few months settled on his shoulders like a heavy cloak, filled with the various challenges he had faced. Yet, among the clouds of doubt, Rays of clarity broke through, revealing an unmistakable truth. He had transformed. Tonight was the company-wide meeting where Jake would unveil the task force initiative, a culmination of his dialogues with Marcus and insights from his collaboration with Sarah. He could feel the pulse of the organization, a restless energy that indicated his colleagues were eager for change. They wanted to believe in their potential again. As he rehearsed in his head, reminders of his previous self lingered. The CEO focused solely on profits, whose self-worth was tied to quarterly reports and investor pressures. That era had faded, replaced by an evolved leader who embraced vulnerability and saw the value in inclusive discourse. Jake was no longer just a figurehead. He had become a facilitator of growth and empathy. At the meeting, Jake surveyed the room. Familiar faces looked back at him with curious anticipation, echoes of doubt about the company's leadership hanging in the air like static electricity. He took a deep breath, feeling the importance of this moment surge through him. I've shared my vision with some of you already, but tonight, we're here to construct a collective vision. By openly discussing the task force initiative, Jake set the tone for inclusivity. He structured the agenda around collaboration, encouraging his colleagues to express their thoughts freely and inviting them to become stakeholders in the creation of a new culture. He could see the flicker of engagement among them as the meeting progressed, uncertainty gradually replaced by a spark of enthusiasm. Trust is built, he stated firmly, when we take tangible steps toward forming connections. This task force is our commitment to listening, not just to each other, but to every team member across every department. We are going to create an environment where every voice matters. The audience nodded, a sign of encouragement that steadily grew as Jake shared stories of his recent journey with Marcus and Sarah. Drawing upon his experiences allowed him to demonstrate vulnerability, and he realized as he spoke that he was reclaiming not just their trust, but his authentic leadership identity. As he unpacked the details, forums for dialogue, initiatives to uplift employee morale, and a framework for tracking cultural changes, the air filled with energy. Jake invited questions and participation, emphasizing their role in shaping the initiative. A hand raised in the back. It was Marcus. Jake, this is great in theory, but how do we sustain the momentum? What if we don't see results? Marcus's challenge expressed both concern and hope. He had come a long way himself, recognizing the importance of dialogue. That's the beauty of our task force, Jake replied, fueled by resolve. We build accountability through regular check-ins and discussions that will adapt based on feedback. This isn't a one-off, it's a continuous evolution. As the meeting progressed, he watched as previous skeptics transformed before his eyes, moving from mere observers to active participants. Ideas flowed like a current through the room, waters that refused to remain stagnant under the influence of genuine engagement. The meeting concluded with a collective cheer, an outpouring of enthusiasm that thrilled Jake's spirit, validating his belief in collaborative leadership. It was a collective achievement, a testament to personal growth that renounced fear of failure for the opportunity to succeed together. Walking out of that conference room, Jake noticed a subtle change within himself. A solid confidence birthed from honest interactions. The pressure had eased, replaced by the recognition that setbacks and victories would now intertwine their narratives. Later that evening, he reflected on the day's events, feeling a sense of achievement wash over him. He had not only defended his position, but had transformed it. No longer was he viewed solely as a CEO seeking profit. He had accomplished an authentic role as a leader who genuinely valued the contributions of his team. For the first time in a long while, Jake felt fulfilled in his personal and professional identity. This journey of reinvention was not merely an end, but an assurance that transformation is a continuous process. Though challenges still loomed ahead, Jake felt equipped with renewed purpose and validated confidence. The meeting was a defining moment, marking the birth of a culture that would thrive on communication and empowerment. With that realization, Jake smiled, knowing that he was precisely where he belonged. This new chapter defined who he had become, not just as a leader, but as an inspiring voice within an organization ready to embrace change. Now, if you found this story compelling, you need to subscribe immediately to our channel. Don't wait even one more second. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support these transformative tales. Comment your reactions and theories about Jake's journey, and don't forget to share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Let's spread these powerful narratives together.